What we want to go through today, and thank you, Scott, for joining, is building relationships, especially for coaches when they are starting new positions, how to fit themselves into the existing culture and make connections with both the athletes and maybe other faculty, fellow coaches that you need to kind of partner with and work with in order to be successful. I'll start out with a quick intro, and then Scott, both for you and Victoria, I think I'll want to give you guys a chance to tell your story a little bit. But our two featured speakers on the call today are going to be Scott Caulfield, Director of Strength and Conditioning at Norwich University, very well respected and well-known coach in the industry. And I've had the pleasure of getting to know Scott definitely since you were head of strength conditioning at the NSCA and education manager there. Still have not met a single person who's ever had anything negative to say about Coach Caulfield. Everybody loves him, and super pumped to have you on the call today. Scott, I'll have you maybe talk a little bit about your journey here in a second. And then Victoria is also on the call. Her background is also within strength conditioning, having several different positions as both assistant strength conditioning coach, head of strength conditioning and performance at the high school level at different schools in Florida. She's based in Miami. And now she works with all of our coaches at Volt, which is and you've probably seen her popping up more on social media, trying to get more of our educational content out there through our different channels. So Scott and Victoria, thank you for joining today. Scott, can you start out? Can you just walk people through, if someone watching this hasn't really followed you or doesn't really know who you are yet, can you talk a little bit about your journey coming up through as a strength and conditioning professional and where you are now?
Yeah, I'll try not to drag it out too long. I feel, I've done a little bit of everything in this profession I think that you could do. I started out like a lot of people, just working in a commercial gym. And for me, that was just my passion. I did it part-time. I was just trying to figure out what I was going to do. And luckily enough for me, there was a guy at the gym who was the general manager at the time that was like, hey man, you have a degree in this. You really seem to like it. People seem to like you. What do you think about coming here full time and just working at the gym instead of the other side jobs that you had and working part-time at the gym? So that was a no-brainer. I was like, done. And so went work full-time and then kind of just worked my way up like through the ranks of a commercial gym. I did personal training. I became the personal training manager. I ended up becoming the fitness director and overseeing two little commercial clubs here in central Vermont, actually. But like all along that time, I kind of was slowly starting to work with athletes, or realize that working with athletes is where I wanted to be. And once I figured out that that was a actual thing, that people did get paid to just train athletes, that's kind of where I tried to put my eggs all into that basket and follow that path. And that for me, that meant meeting people that said, hey, there's this organization called the NSCA, and there's a certification called the CSCS, and this is what you need to look into if you're going to do this profession. And so that was great. And it really did. It led me down a wormhole of seeking out, sports performance professionals and information. And I went to, I obviously looked up the certification and did that. But then when I first started going to NSCA events, that's where people, were really welcoming and like super helpful about the profession. I met a guy named Paul Goodman, who was at the University of Vermont at the time. He was the Vermont State NSCA director at that time. And he actually left that position to go to the Chicago Blackhawks, where he's still there, on his third Stanley Cup ring. And so he's had a great run, and just fortunate to be mentored by people like that early on. So once I realized that was a thing, it was like, all right, how do I make this, into my profession now? And so I started doing it kind of on a small scale with it, just trying to get athletes here in Central Vermont to work with me at my gym. And that snowballed into a summer conditioning camp that I ran that became pretty successful. It was awesome. And then just kept networking, right? I went to state events and I got to speak at a couple state events, and I went to the NSC National Conference a few years in a row, and that turned into every year in a row since 2003 or whatever it is now, right? But it snowballed, and, I had the opportunity to get involved in athletics. And the funny part of this whole kind of thing, and I won't try and make the story too long, but the first team I ever worked with was something through that commercial gym that I worked at. And it was a rugby coach that was at Norwich University who saw me doing this thing
Oh,
for his
crazy.
daughter, for his daughter's third grade class at the gym. He came up to me after and was like, "Hey, do you think you could do this with a college rugby team?" And I'm pretty sure I had never even seen rugby before. I had no idea what it was, but I was like, absolutely, right? Like, I could totally do this with 40 college rugby guys. And that snowballed into a great relationship. And he's on year like 22 here now as the head rugby coach, and had a lot to do, I think, with me being here, giving back here. So, but again, worked in the commercial setting for a long time, kind of got my feet wet and figured out what I wanted to do. And that being said, strength and conditioning was always part of my, like, I learned early on that it helped in my own sports performance, playing basketball all my life and growing up. And that started clicking. I wasn't a great college student, so I went to college for 2 years, failed out of college after my sophomore year pretty much. And my mom was like, "So what else are you going to do?" Right. I was like, man, I'm not staying in this tiny town in Vermont and like becoming a carpenter or something. Because I also realized that if I had to work with my hands for a living, I would be starving to death rather quickly. So I joined the Navy, and it was awesome. I had a great experience and got to do some cool stuff and see a ton of different places that most people will never see in their life. And when I came back out, college was a lot easier. I was like, man, if you actually show up and just go to class, it's almost like too easy, right?
Yeah.
And then we got my degree in physical education and started working at that gym. And then that snowballed, like I said, into the different collegiate setting. Worked with Dartmouth Rugby, was one of the first teams after working with Norwich. As I got my experience, I moved down to that way, which is Hanover, is about an hour south of where we are now, where I grew up here, and worked at Dartmouth College. And then that kind of snowballed into more kind of doing things with the NSCA, more volunteering. And I had the opportunity to take a position there in January 2010. And so going to the NSCA headquarters was incredible. Like, I just saw it as an opportunity where I thought I could take my career to the next level in a lot of different ways, right? Be around the best of the best, interact, meet new people and see new things. I'd been out there to visit at a clinic they did in 2008 or 9. I was like, wow, Colorado's awesome. This headquarters place is awesome. The people I met. So I just put as many feelers out. And again, I think I really do feel that luck is when preparation meets opportunity. I kind of feel that's where I totally agree and believe in. And so I went out to NSCA headquarters, had an awesome time. I took a pay cut to take the job out there. I was working in a cube in the back of the education department, not coaching as much as I thought, and it was like, wow, what did you just moved across the country to do this, and left working with these athletes at Dartmouth. And, I persevered. One thing led to another. I actually got promoted 6 months after I had gotten the job there, into this head coach position, which snowballed and evolved a lot the time I was there. Right. And I think I met Blair early on too. And when I was visiting around, but again, the coolest part of my job at NSCA was getting to go out and visit the coaches and meet all the coaches that are, part of the organization, and spend time with them and see them in their setting and how they did things. And then, getting to host the podcast at one point there for the first 3 seasons that we had, that was, again, just another opportunity to tune up your toolbox and meet and talk, to pick the brains of the greatest coaches around. Get out of my comfort zone a little. Like, again, Boyd Epley, who was there at the time that I was there, was one of my mentors, and he was very adamant about getting me outside of the NSCA building. And he's like, no, you're the guy. He's like, I'm old now. Nobody wants to talk to me. He's like, you're the new young guy that people need to talk to, and they need to know that you're the connection here for the NSCA. And it was huge. I think we made a lot of inroads back into the coaching, strength and conditioning in college and professional and high school that had been neglected. And it was a really cool opportunity. And, all great things come to an end. I think at some point, I had a blast, and there was a lot of things on my list that I wanted to do at NSCA headquarters still. But at the same time, I look at it like how they have volunteers and board of directors. And I kind of started thinking, it's someone else's turn to take this on and do something different, and it wasn't that I was burned out or Didn't have a lack of lists that I wanted to accomplish, but this cool opportunity came up at Colorado College, where I had actually stepped in to help interim. And I literally was only planning to do it interim and help them until they got a couple coaches there. But after I'd been there for 2 weeks and I was working, so I was working half a day at CC and then going to the NSCA the rest of the day, or vice versa. But after I'd been back in kind of that full gym setting where I was just coaching half the day, I was like, man, I should just stay here. And it's funny because if you ask the AD who's there now, and she's the one that hired me, she'll tell you that it was her plan all along that they were going to keep me. So that's pretty funny to hear when you hear her tell it like that. Out of the blue, I was only at CC for 2 years, really 2 full school years. This opportunity came up at Norwich, and I literally grew up 2 towns over from here. I went to basketball camp at Norwich in middle school and high school. We had a ski hill literally across the street from campus that I learned how to ski on in 3rd grade. So there was just so many connections here. The head women's hockey coach here I've known since she was in high school. I trained her when she was an athlete. She did an internship with me in college. Our assistant women's basketball coach is one of my longtime men's league buddies. So it was literally like coming to your hometown back to a job that was the job that you wanted all along, right? Which is wild to think about in this profession, that something like that could happen. So just too many stars aligned, and I had to do it, and I missed it, and I missed the small town rural life most days. I'll say that most days now that I'm back, some days I'm like, oh yeah, we don't have DoorDash here or whatever it is that you don't have, but it's been awesome. We've got such a great and unique place here, being a military college, one of the senior military colleges, and just the stuff that we're doing. And it's a really you hear people say that it's a special place. When you hear that often enough, you know that it's more than just a phrase that people use. And after being here, I can tell that it really is. And it's because of the military side. It's because of being in rural Vermont. Physical fitness underpins everything we do here, between athletics, the Corps of Cadets. This campus is built on a mountain. Like, you can't even walk around campus without being fit, basically. So it's in our guiding values. So there's just so many boxes that it checked for me to be here, being a veteran, all of the above. So it's been awesome. And I'm still as involved as ever with the NSCA. I joke around with Eric that they should probably still be giving me a stipend of some sort for everything that I'm doing. But it's been a blast. No, it really has. I've been so fortunate to have some really cool experiences in my career.
Yeah, that's so special to see it come full circle. It's such a cool story. And I think I just want to kind of highlight and return back to it. Early on in your career, you were working in the private setting, working at facilities, and really your entryway was with the NSCA and being involved in events and just seeing what kind of doors would open for you if you were volunteering and if you were present. And it sounds like that kind of just one thing led to another, and that's kind of how you found your path. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. Like I said,
cool.
And I've always said it's better to be lucky than good sometimes. So take what you can get.
There's a lot I want to return to. I want to give Victoria a chance to talk a little bit about her path and her journey, her coaching journey as well.
Are you guys kidding me? I have to follow Scott. I should have gone first.
That's okay. No, we want to hear from you too.
Similar sort of path. I started off as a fitness professional, personal training and teaching group fitness classes. And as I got to college, I continued to do that and sort of stumbled upon strength and conditioning, not really knowing it even existed. I walked on to a Division I program at UConn, and that was really my first encounter with strength and conditioning. And then I had a female strength and conditioning coach while I was an athlete there. And I then realized, oh, okay, this is something that I can do. There's opportunity here for me. And I super loved being in the weight room. Like, that was probably the only reason that I stayed at the sport and stayed as long as I did on the team, was because I just really loved being in the weight room, and that environment was everything for me. So took a little pivot while I was at school and rerouted. I knew I wanted to be in some sort of health fields and fitness profession, but rerouted and went down the strength and conditioning route. Interned with UConn women's basketball. That's my claim to fame. And then realized I needed to continue my education. That was kind of the way the field was going. I needed to get a master's degree and went on to University of Miami and interned with the men's basketball team while I was there. But I think the most like striking thing in my journey was working at the collegiate level and realizing that, you know, these 18, 19, 20-year-olds that couldn't skip, couldn't jump rope, couldn't do basic movements. And you're like, how did you get here? Like, how did you get to this point? You know, where was the disconnect in your athletic career where you're still not able to do these things? So I sort of turned my eyes towards the high school world and realized there was a big gap there. Not a lot of high school programs had strength and conditioning coaches. Not a lot of athletes across this country at the high school level even have access to weight rooms, let alone expertise. So realizing that there was a gap there that I think I could really help and shape, I started looking at the high school setting. And that's kind of where I took off and never really left. I coached at a high school in Los Angeles, Harvard Westlake School. Then went down, came back to the East Coast. I'm an East Coast gal, and worked at IMG Academy. And I led a bunch of programs there, a bunch of their academy programs, all high school, women's soccer, women's basketball, and then helped with a couple other programs. But there I had a unique opportunity to work with some international groups. I was able to work with the Chinese national basketball team and was able to collaborate with Beijing Sport University and the Chinese government on a talent identification project with a bunch of their youth female soccer players. So that was a really unique and fun and challenging experience I had there. And then my mini full circle moment is I ended up back in Miami where I started, and I worked at a couple independent schools while I was in school. I told myself I would never go back to Miami, and then here I am. I've been here for 5 years. I went to take on a new position at a school as their head of performance and co-PE chair, and was there for a couple years and realized I really enjoyed talking to coaches and kind of had this big picture view. And I really enjoyed the process of implementation and curriculum mapping and helping integrate these programs and long-term athletic development programs into schools. You know, I had talk to coaches in the area, you know, giving advice here and there, which ultimately led me to seek out Volt and this unique opportunity that I have here. So that's my short story.
Yeah. Thanks, Victoria. Yeah, it's tough. I'm sure it's difficult to get away from the sunshine in Miami. It's probably tough to leave that.
I complain a lot about the sun and the warmth and the super nice weather.
So it's probably like in the 70s for you. And is it still single digits for you right now in Vermont?
Yeah, it was 5 yesterday.
Yeah.
But it's snowing again, and I'm glad it hasn't been snowing yet. So we're finally getting snow, thank goodness. Which I say. I love snow. I'm one of those weirdos.
Oh yeah, what a difference. So with both of you talking about the different positions you've held, having to, you know, bounce around a little bit, I think for both of you, probably not bouncing around as much as some other strength and conditioning coaches have early in their career, but still, I'm sure there's a challenge. Well, actually, Scott, why don't you kind of start us out? What are some of the challenges of starting as a strength coach in a new organization, whether you're someone who's lower on the totem pole or you're somebody who's coming in a director position?
Yeah, I mean, everywhere is different, right? So, you know, understanding I don't know that the hierarchy is the right word, but like understanding department. If you're in an athletic department, you know, are you in a setting like this where we have one assistant and a director and 22 varsity teams, right? Or are we at somewhere like a Power 5 school where we have 5 or 8 strength coaches for a multitude of teams? So I think that obviously dictates a little bit of how you can go about things, right? Or are you at a high school where you may have the whole thing all to yourself, or maybe there are a couple of teachers that run it, or maybe it's assisted. You know, it's Colorado College, we had more resources than we do here, had a little bit more support staff, you know, so here we come to a place where we kind of are getting by with less. But that being said, like the tenacity and the passion for strength and conditioning here across all the different teams is wildly different than it was at CC, and it's just interesting. Obviously, the military side has part of that, part to play in it with the preparation required to become an officer in the military or become enlisted and go that route. So it's just depended. I think too, being understanding the situation, right? So I know that they did have a lot of adjunct people here teaching in different departments, especially in HHPR, which is Health and Human Performance, which is where we help out. And I had just kind of put some feelers out the first year, and they had me teach a lab for one of the, basically like the CSCS prep class called Applications in Strength and Conditioning. And then this year they basically gave that entire class to me. So the first year I was just trying to build some networking with that side of the house to hopefully tap into interns. Obviously I did a good enough job with the lab that they basically gave me that entire class this semester. And I'll teach tactical strength and conditioning in the spring. So I'm teaching 2 classes now as an adjunct kind of instructor. This is great. It's my pipeline to interns. It's helped me create connections across campus and just become known better. And I think that's important if you have the bandwidth, right? Like, I don't know that you know that when you first start. And maybe you don't. If you're an assistant strength coach and you have X amount of teams, and maybe that's all you have the time and energy to do in a given day. So, I'm not saying that that's it. But if it's an area that interests you, I think trying to figure out how to get involved, because again, as we know, all of us on this call know, right, the rubber meets the road in this profession is the application of strength conditioning and being able to coach and get results hands-on in the weight room. So you got to have that practical experience, and maybe you just need that part. So I think it's a double-edged sword. You got to know how to read the room, how to see where you're at and what resources you have and what you need. I say we have 2 racquetball courts. It's our varsity weight room here. And I tell people we have everything we need. We just don't have everything we want. And that is what it is right now. We can safely fit 30 athletes in our weight room. And, at times we have to have groups of 50 to 60. So it is what it is, right? But I utilize a lot of my resources between, position papers that I've been part of with NSCA standard and guidelines and different resources to kind of prove and show the administration right now why we need more help and why we need bigger facilities and why safety is important, all these different things. So, it's a gradual process. A lot of places are cutting back, right? We may be kind of trending toward a little bit of cutbacks in different things in different areas. So kind of know where you are and what you can do and how to get the most bang for your buck out of what you're doing is where I have found the most value.
In your different roles, most recently at Colorado College and at Norwich, how important has it been for you to build relationships with those sport coaches, especially since you have limited facility time and space and scheduling and everything?
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. Obviously, I'm a huge relationship person anyway, and I think that's the key to everything we do in this profession is results and relationships. It's one of my old mentors always said, and I feel it's exactly right on the money. I think you have to have the coaches have to believe in that what you're doing too. And when I came into this position, I was the 4th strength coach that my seniors had. So there was a new person every year for 4 years. We had some sport coaches here that wouldn't even let their team work with the strength conditioning coach because just of whatever it might be. Maybe it was relationship based. Maybe it was because of what they thought they did. Maybe it was what they actually did anyway. It's neither here nor there. So I had to go and engage these coaches. Thankfully, most of the ones that didn't work with the previous strength coaches were on the search committee. So they were the ones that actually hired me. So that helped to have that relationship, right? It didn't hurt. Again, I mentioned our head women's hockey coach that I've known since she was a senior in high school. Didn't hurt that I have a killer relationship with her already. So there was already people that trusted what she had to say about me coming here. But it was going out and connecting with these people and kind of, seeing where I could help them and meeting them where they're at. What do they value, right? What do these coaches value in different things? Again, it's a small profession, small world. Our men's hockey coach also, he was at UMass Lowell prior to here, and I know his old strength coach from there at the time, so like I knew the things that guy knows that he likes, so I'm able to kind of talk those types of things with him in areas that I know is concerned about. It also helps too when I bring something up and I know that he's probably not going to care about it, right? So because he knows that at this Division III level, like we may not have the bandwidth to do something. So if someone brings up like a technology idea or something to him, he's like, well, are you going to help me, decipher that? Or are you going to be translating that? And I'm like, nope, I don't have time to. Okay, then we don't need to talk about that because we're not going to use it, right? So it's just, it's all about communication. And I think that's where the relationship building comes in. So, being able to be clear, and I hired the first female assistant that we've ever had here. And she played on our 2018 women's national championship hockey team. It's been a huge asset. She's a great strength coach and she's a great positive female role model. So we've immediately, just connected and engaged so many female athletes here as well, who again, just love to train. That underpins everything we do here. So it's awesome that we can now support it with, someone else to look up to as well.
Yeah, that's great. Victoria, I'm gonna switch over to you now. Oh, did you already have something you wanted to add?
Well, yeah, I just think, strength and conditioning is such a unique field. The fact that, we still have a lot of skepticism from sport coaches and from administration on what we do and why we do it. It's something that coaches, we're going to have to continue to sort of support what we do. Part of that, for me, at least, building those relationships, there's a lot of education that we still have to do. And I think, whether you're brand new or, you're brand new in a new position that never existed before, or whether you're going into a pre-existing position, you are faced with judgment right off the rip, right? You are automatically being, judged. You are automatically being criticized for just being new. So I think coming in with a very transparent attitude, like Scott had said, and a very genuine attitude always goes a long way. But you do have to explain, unfortunately, and fortunately, that's part of building your credibility, right? You have to educate not just the athletes, but you have to educate the coaches too, and the administration. And that's something you have to continue to do, especially as the field evolves and your environments evolve and all that. It is something that you can't just step into and assume you're going to get respect and assume you're going to have credibility right away. It's something you have to build, and it does take a little bit of patience because, a lot of coaches are like, I have all this experience, I have all these degrees, I have all these credentials. How come I can't keep a job, or how come nobody wants to come to the weight room? Well, it's because you probably haven't taken the time to, have those conversations and have those educational moments and show that you genuinely care about the program. I think that's a huge component too, is, building those relationships. They have to be genuine. People can sniff out, when it's not. Part of that is, I've done it. I started from scratch at my last school, and you have to show up. You have to show up to games. You have to show up to practices. You have to, spend the extra minutes talking to your athletes, talking to your coaches, having those conversations, making those adjustments, checking in on them. This should come naturally, I would assume, for most people, but definitely in those first couple months of starting somewhere, just showing that you care goes a lot further than how much you know. And so like Scott said, it's like the relationship stuff is key. You could be the smartest person in the room, but if you don't know how to form a relationship, nobody's going to listen to you. So for anybody that's listening, that's having trouble, potentially in their programs, is take a step back. You don't have to be the smartest guy in the room all the time, but be the most genuine, be the one that cares the most. And that's going to take you a lot further than anything else.
Yeah.
I think that was I want to just quick chat while it's hot in my mind. What Victoria said, like I live about a quarter mile from campus, and I intentionally tried to live as close to school as possible. One, I knew the first couple of years I might not have an assistant. That was part of the deal to come here, but you never know. So I got lucky that they gave me that quickly. But that being said, I probably at least show face at almost every single event, home game that we have. And it wasn't like to earn brownie points or whatever, right? But it was like Victoria was saying, it was for the athletes to show that I'm there for them as much as they should be for me when I need them to show up and train, right? And give me all they got. And again, it is what it is. It's just this unique case. But I bet, I think that alone over the past year has just shown, and it's things that other people notice, right? All the AD notices that I'm at all these games and I don't have to be. And in Division 3, it is different. Like and I'll just tell this one last little story about Norwich, because I know everyone on here will appreciate it. But I went to an away football game last year with the football team, and the football coach said it was the first time that a strength coach had traveled with them in 20 years. And he sent me a special email, like thanking me for coming to the game because I gave up my day off to spend time with him, which is, for us, and I know Blair's worked in high profile and in big time D1 sports, like to get a little note like that from a head coach is worth more money in my pocket, honestly, to me at this point. It's huge. But that's a little quick aside. Victoria made me think of like just being here.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad both of you talked about all of those things, because my follow-up question was, how do you facilitate these conversations, right? How do you make sure that the conversation feels genuine? You're not just like trying to wait outside somebody's door until they step out and like cut them off to trap them, but I think a lot of that makes sense. And the more present, it sounds like the more present you are, the more opportunities there will be to have those conversations.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way I look at it. 100%. It's giving you the opportunity for a new point of contact with a coach, an athlete, administrator. Sorry, Victoria, go ahead.
No, yeah, exactly. And I think another piece of that is being able to compromise. In the field that we're in, it's a blessing and a curse that there are so many ways to achieve the same goal, and you have to be willing to meet people halfway. You don't have to compromise who you are and who your beliefs are and what your personal philosophies are, but you have to be able to adapt and compromise to, maybe that sport coach that, is a little bit hesitant or reluctant to, jump into your program. Meet them halfway. And then next thing you know, you're going to get them 3/4 of the way. And then next thing you know, they're all the way in. So just being able to compromise, set your ego aside, which is hard to do. That is definitely a learned trait, a learned skill. Just being able to step back and just say, all right, where can I meet these athletes? Where can I meet these coaches? Where can I meet these administrators? And then, you start planting that seed. If you show that you can give and take, then they're going to give and take too. It's like any relationship, right? It's a give and take. And I think if you're able to do that, you'll eventually get to where you want it to be, where you want your program to be.
Victoria, I want to return back to you. We've talked a lot about sports and sports teams, probably where a lot of people who are viewing this will work. But I'd also like for us to touch on kind of the PE setting. And I know in your past roles, maybe once you get past that first 3 months, year, however long it takes for you to feel comfortable to where you feel like you can start to really push some change and prioritize some things. One experience that you've told me about in the past is implementing and educating on LTAD throughout a PE department. How long did it take for you to really realize like that this is something that you could do to change the culture? And then how did you go about actually making that change and making a difference?
Yeah, I think when you're starting in a new school or a new program, you have to, okay, what is your goal? What is your end goal? And so let's say, end goal is you want, your seniors to be athletic beasts, and they're going off to compete at a high level, and you want them to be proficient in X, Y, and Z. Okay, so now we have to work backwards. How do we get there? If you're fortunate enough to work in a school or a school system where you have some sort of control and oversight of, potentially middle school all the way through high school, you need to start as early as you can. I was fortunate to have to work in a couple places where we did have oversight from 6th grade to 12th grade. So my philosophy is we can't wait until we get to ninth grade to start building that foundation of athletic performance, we need to start at a younger age. And using the term strength and conditioning with sixth grade parents is extremely intimidating. It's not going to go over well with administration either, but you change the word from strength and conditioning to human performance in your PE curriculum. Now you're onto something. You're not going to just back squat a kid that you've never seen squat before, right? There's natural progressions that we do. Well, we can just even regress what we're already doing even further, just down to just the basic functions and basic levels, and implement that in PE. That's going to be a huge win for you if you have access to PE programs, is somehow intertwining it in the skill development that they're already teaching. They go hand in hand, right? Skill development is all about coordination and motor control and neural control. We're doing that too. We're just doing it at a higher level. But regressing it and being able to say, well, all of this, what we're doing now in sixth, seventh, and eighth grade is going to translate quite nicely when they graduate and they come up to us at the high school level, but now we're in the weight room and we're moving some weights around. So if you have PE teachers or if you are a PE teacher or a sport coach that has access to PE teachers, I think this is an incredible way to touch more of your athletes at an earlier age, and getting them involved in these aspects of human performance and sport performance. But just change the lingo a little bit when you go to sell it, because that's going to be key. You can't just say you can lift. Don't get me wrong. You can totally lift. Kids in sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, it's been done before. We've got lighter barbells in some weight rooms, and it can be done. That's not to say that it can't, but that's also that educational piece that's going to take some time. It might, first couple of years you introduce this, it might just be body weight movements, which is totally acceptable. But then maybe by year 2, year 3, now they've got dumbbells in their hands. And next thing you know, they've got training bars in their hands. Next thing you know, you've got bumper plates. And next thing you know, you have a full-fledged sports performance program going from sixth grade through 12th grade. And what I will say is that sort of translation, that piece of culture, I would say, that shift will take, I think it takes about 3 years to start seeing like a real culture shift at a school where, becomes just a piece of what they do. A lot of the times we struggle as strength coaches that, they don't want to be there. They don't understand why they have to do it. Certain sports are still not, up to date with strength and conditioning regimens. So I think that shift in culture, my last school, I could really see it after 3 years where there was more buy-in. There was just more of comfortability. Everybody in the weight room, guys, girls, everybody just felt very comfortable in that space. It wasn't an intimidating space anymore. It was just like, all right, this is what we're here to do. We already done this stuff at 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I already know what a squat is. I already know what a lunge is. I already know what a hinge is. So let's go. It just makes your life a lot easier too as a high school strength coach or in college strength coach when you start them a lot younger. In a safely, progressed program, makes everybody's lives a lot easier. So yeah, I'm happy to talk about that with anybody else. I love LTAD stuff and PE curriculum. So I could talk about that all day. I'll stop now.
Yeah. Do you think it's possible to narrow in or explain or maybe speculate around like why it would generally take 3 years or so for that culture shift? Do the athletes play a really big role in that and some kids just have to graduate, or is it enough time for you to build trust after a couple seasons? Like, what do you think is the explanation for that time frame?
Yeah, all the above there. Definitely you got to weed out some of the old culture, in other words, they need to graduate. But then, just from the 3-year time window of middle school, in the case that I had, those 3 years, you could see those 6th graders coming into 9th grade, or those 7th graders now going into 10th and 11th grade, plus the kids graduating. You could see, kids feed off of each other. So you've got kids that, don't want to be there, and that's the cool way to do it. It's cool to not want to be there. Then everybody's going to sort of follow that same culture. But when you start breeding little meatheads in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, that culture will start to shift a little bit. But you did touch upon the fact that culture will really only shift if they know that you know what you're talking about, the coaches know what you're talking about, the PE teachers trust you, the administration trusts you. And then once again, that relationship piece, unfortunately, if they don't like you per se, they're not going to want to be there. And I'm certainly not liked by everybody, but I would say majority of my athletes always enjoyed coming into the weight room. So there's both pieces, an educational piece, the patience piece, the graduation piece, and then just, the trust piece for sure.
Awesome. I want to ask one more question of you, Scott. Another reason why Norwich is so unique, we could talk all about your hometown areas and why they're so awesome, but is because in addition to all of the sports, all the teams that you guys have, you are also a military institution. And so you're also working with cadets who need to prepare for a different goal. Can you talk a little bit about and maybe compare, contrast similarities, differences in working with that population?
Yeah, I mean, in the college setting, it's probably a little different, right? Than if we were talking college athletics versus full-time military folks or special forces.
Yeah.
But
and because you've worked with that population too, right? Especially at the NSCA.
Right. Yeah. NSCA, we had, some 10th group special forces guys. Colorado Springs SWAT team was our main resident team. And so those are grown adults that are, preparing for a job. And sometimes, again, that in their job, right, they may get, especially CSPD, for example, like our SWAT guys they would be on pager and they'd get a call and be running out the door in the middle of a lift or at the end of a lift or at the warm up of a lift. So it just depends, right? So here we have a little bit more unique setting in that. But we are seeing what the United States is seeing in that people are not as physically prepared as they have been in the past. And so the readiness to do the job of whatever in the military is not as high. It's not as high for some of these incoming college freshmen. Again, one of the things I did just to try and kind of make inroads here was to connect with different people in our Corps of Cadets. And again, be careful what you ask for when you go to a new place is what I would also say, because I've now got my hands in so many different areas on this campus that it's almost overwhelming sometimes. And it's great to be good at what you do and be respected again, but also when that happens, sometimes it's a perfect storm of now you're like, oh my gosh, I got to say no to some of this stuff. Right. So I'm, the cool thing is that we were able to get the admissions department to pick up the tab on another Volt license last year. And what we tried to do this summer was onboard our entire incoming Corps of Cadets freshman class, Rook, as they're called, the Rook class with the Volt app to help prepare them better for the first semester here at Norwich, which is known as Rookdom, when you're squaring corners and you're getting yelled at a lot and you're learning to basically manage your own life and march and do all these crazy things. So it's a little bit different, right? The Rooks in our PT program, if you're in the Corps Cadets, they have a physical fitness test, the Norwich physical fitness test, which is a 2-mile run, 2-minute push-up, 2-minute sit-up. And we have plenty of people that don't pass that, right? So, it's just basic assessing athletes, meeting people where we're at, figuring out how if we have kids that don't pass this PT program, how do we train them up? And for me now, it's becoming, all right, how am I now going to work with our Corps of Cadets to train what we call our MFTs and PTIs, basically the cadets that run physical training and oversee it, and how to integrate into that and teach them better practices. And again, now that I've been here a year, I'm going into this coming semester in January with 5 interns now, and some of them are in the Corps of Cadets, and they're passionate about changing the PT program that they've done because they see it now as exercise science students and seniors with a little different lens, and they realize it's not great and it could be better. And so, it's a cool opportunity. But again, it's general physical preparation at its finest, and we're really just trying to improve their overall physical preparation and reduce injuries like across the board. For them, it's a little more repetitive overuse, and they're probably rucking, right, carrying a rucksack and running up and down mountains and hillsides and all the fun stuff that we have here in Vermont to choose from. And then, in being sleep deprived in their first semester of college and all those academic stresses, right? We just had one of my seniors in the football team was just in here because it's finals week. and he was sick, and he's like, yep, get sick every finals week. And that's like, oh, shocker, right?
Yeah.
we know Dr. Mann did the research on that one. So yeah, I mean, again, like like our setting, but we're helping to prepare them for that future military career too. So, and hopefully, they may oversee some sort of physical training in the military, and hopefully we're going to give them the tools now that they're going to be better prepared for that career, because they're going to have better tools in their toolbox related to fitness, even if it's not technically their job when they leave here.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because we're seeing, even though we're seeing more strength and conditioning positions opening up within the tactical sector, it's still a huge scale problem that they have within the different branches of the military, where they end up just having peers, like peer fitness trainers, people who are not necessarily trained, definitely not trained to the same extent as somebody who's a strength and conditioning coach, still being responsible for facilitating, I guess the appropriate way is probably saying facilitating workouts, right? And it's interesting that that model is also kind of weaving its way in where you're at with your cadets, as you're able to leverage their peers in order to help them train a little bit better.
Yeah, and it helps building relationships, like we've talked about, like Victoria's mentioned too. I've become fast friends with our commanding officer of the Army here, who's oversees the Army ROTC, and I'm becoming better friends with our head of the Navy Marine Corps, who's a colonel in the Marine Corps. And, I've hit it off. I invited him to testing last week when we were testing some of our teams, and he came and ate it up, loved it. So, it's key to make some key connections like that. And those guys are two of my biggest supporters now, in the Corps of Cadets. So like they have a culminating kind of event, and this is just kind of cool story to end for the rooks to kind of graduate and become recognized, is what they call it. And basically this year, the commandant who's over all of them had the cadet who is in charge of implementing this kind of graduation, and it's just a 3-day beatdown, right, to graduate, amongst other things. But they made them basically run it by me for approval, and the commandant was like, if Coach Caulfield axes anything on this plan, you're not doing it. And he also teed up a couple things that he didn't like on it, so I just helped him out by supporting him, and then I axed a couple things that were ridiculous that they wanted to do, and so it went pretty cool. And like I said, it's great, and it's, like I said, having your fingers in a lot of different areas, but it'll probably evolve into something bigger picture for me, down the road, which is going to be cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's a great story to end our chat on. A lot of cool insights from both of you. Thank you so much for sharing. Scott, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they have questions? I know. Yeah, I'll let you just answer that.
Yeah, I'm on social media too much, so just hit me up on Instagram at Coach Caulfield. So I'm happy to answer messages there. It's the easiest way to get hold of me.
Cool. And Victoria, for you, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn works for me. Victoria at Volt Athletics, if you want to reach me via email. And before we jump off, I will, for anybody that is interested in reading more about the first 90 days of a job, or any sort of onboarding for a job, I read a book a couple of years ago called The Last 90 Days by Michael Watkins. So highly recommend for anybody out there that needs a new read. It's called The Last 90 Days. But
last 90 days or first 90 days?
Sorry, the first 90 days.
All right, we'll put that in the notes for this. It's funny you mentioned I have that book on my shelf too. I had no idea that you read it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Not the
Cool.
last, first.
the first 90 days. Awesome. Hey, thanks again, you guys. Really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you all later.